For 600 years, one empire made European kings wake up in cold sweats. They controlled trade routes that made them richer than modern-day oil barons. They had armies so fierce that enemies would surrender just hearing their war drums. But here's the crazy part. This unstoppable force that once knocked on Europe's front door eventually crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. How does an empire that once made Rome look like a weekend hobby project just disappear? Stick around, because this story has more plot twists than your favorite Netflix series, and trust me, the ending will blow your mind. And hey, if this story gets your blood pumping like mine, smash that like button and hit subscribe. It really helps me bring you more epic tales from history. Let's dive in. Let's start at the very beginning. And no, we're not talking about some grand palace or legendary city. We're talking about a small group of horsemen wandering around what we now call Turkey, looking for a place to call home. These weren't your typical nomads, though. These were the Ottomans, and they had bigger dreams than a food truck owner hoping to open a restaurant chain. The year was around 1300, and a guy named Osman, yes, that's where Ottoman comes from, was leading this little tribe. Now, Osman wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He didn't inherit vast lands or golden treasures. What he had was something far more dangerous: ambition and perfect timing. See, the Seljuk Empire, which had been the big player in the region, was falling apart faster than a cheap umbrella in a storm. It's like when a popular restaurant chain starts closing locations. Suddenly there's space for new players to move in. And Osman? He was ready to serve up something special. Here's where it gets interesting. Osman had this dream, literally a dream, where he saw a massive tree growing from his body, its branches covering the entire world. His advisor told him this meant his descendants would rule a great empire. Now you might think, come on, it's just a dream. But Osman took it seriously. Sometimes the craziest ideas lead to the most incredible results. The genius of early Ottoman success wasn't just military might. Though they had plenty of that, it was their approach to conquest. Unlike other empires that came in swinging swords and burning everything down, the Ottomans were more like that friend who gradually wins everyone over at a party. They'd move into an area, respect local customs, keep local leaders in power, and before you knew it, everyone was flying Ottoman flags. But here's the kicker. They weren't just collecting territory like trading cards. They were building something sustainable. Every conquered land became a piece of a larger puzzle, each contributing to a growing machine that would soon become unstoppable. By the time Osman died, his little tribe had grown into a serious regional power. His son continued the expansion, and his son after that. It's like watching a startup grow from a garage operation to a global corporation, except instead of selling apps, they were collecting kingdoms. Fast forward to 1453, and we meet one of history's most ambitious young rulers, Mehmed II. This guy was only 21 years old, but he had his eyes set on a prize that had been tempting conquerors for over 1,000 years, Constantinople. Now, Constantinople wasn't just any city. This was the crown jewel of the Byzantine Empire, the last remaining piece of the once mighty Roman Empire. Its walls had stood for over 1,000 years, turning away everyone from barbarian hordes to crusading knights. People called it the city protected by God. Taking Constantinople would be like a rookie baseball player hitting a home run in their first World Series at bat. But Mehmed wasn't your average 21-year-old. While most people his age were figuring out their careers, he was planning one of history's most spectacular sieges. And here's where the story gets really good. He had a secret weapon that would change warfare forever. The Ottomans had embraced gunpowder technology like a tech company embracing social media. They built cannons so large that people called them monsters. One cannon was so big it took 60 oxen and 200 men just to move it into position. Imagine trying to parallel park that thing. The siege lasted 53 days, and it was like the ultimate chess match. The Byzantines had experience, tradition, and those legendary walls. The Ottomans had youth, innovation, and enough determination to move mountains. Or in this case, enough determination to blast through walls that had never been breached. The moment those walls came crashing down, everything changed. It wasn't just a city falling, it was the end of an era and the beginning of another. Mehmed walked through those broken walls and declared himself the heir to Roman emperors. Talk about a confidence boost. But here's what made the Ottomans special. They didn't just conquer Constantinople, they transformed it. They renamed it Istanbul and turned it into a melting pot that would make modern New York jealous. Christians, Muslims, Jews, Greeks, Turks, Arabs, everyone had a place in this new world. It was like creating the ultimate cultural fusion restaurant, except the menu included entire civilizations. The Hagia Sophia, that magnificent Byzantine church, became a mosque but kept its Christian mosaics. It was the Ottoman way. Instead of destroying the past, they added their own chapter to the story. Enter Suleiman the Magnificent. And trust me, that nickname wasn't just good marketing. This guy took the Ottoman Empire and turned it into the superpower of the 16th century. If the Ottoman Empire was a rock band, Suleiman's reign was their greatest hits album. While European kings were still figuring out how to keep their own nobles in line, Suleiman was running an empire that stretched from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Yemen. He controlled trade routes that connected 3 continents. Merchants from Venice to India had to play by Ottoman rules if they wanted to do business. But Suleiman wasn't just about conquest, though he was pretty good at that too. This guy besieged Vienna and made European rulers lose sleep for decades. The Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, one of the most powerful men in Europe, basically spent his entire reign trying to figure out how to deal with the Ottoman threat. It's like being in a video game where the final boss just keeps getting stronger. Here's where Suleiman gets really interesting though. While he was expanding the empire, he was also building one of the most sophisticated legal systems of his time. They called him the lawgiver for a reason. He created laws that protected minorities, regulated trade, and organized the government. It was like creating the world's first multinational corporation, complete with HR policies and everything. And let's talk about the Janissaries, the Ottoman elite military force. These weren't your typical soldiers. They were taken as young boys, trained in the finest military academies, and turned into the most disciplined fighting force in the world. They were so effective that European armies tried to copy their tactics. It's like everyone trying to copy the playbook of a championship football team. The Ottoman Navy during Suleiman's time controlled the Mediterranean like it was their personal swimming pool. Barbarossa, their admiral, was so feared that Spanish mothers would scare their children with stories about him. Eat your vegetables or Barbarossa will get you. Talk about effective parenting. But here's what really made Suleiman magnificent. He understood that a great empire needed more than just great armies. He built the Suleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul, a masterpiece that still makes architects weep with joy. He patronized poets, artists, and scholars. Under his rule, Istanbul became the Paris of its time, the place where culture, art and learning flourished. But as they say, what goes up must come down, and the Ottoman Empire was about to learn this lesson the hard way. After Suleiman's death in 1566, things started getting complicated. You know how sometimes successful companies start falling apart after their founder leaves. The Ottoman Empire went through something similar, except instead of board meetings, they had palace intrigue that would make Game of Thrones look like a children's bedtime story. Welcome to the era of the Sultanate of Women. And before you get excited thinking this was some early feminist movement, let me explain what really happened. As sultans became less involved in day-to-day governance, their mothers and wives started filling the power vacuum. The imperial harem became the real seat of power, with palace politics more twisted than a pretzel factory. Imagine trying to run a global empire while your mum is constantly interfering with your decisions. Your wife is plotting against your advisors, and your concubines are forming political alliances. It's like trying to run a Fortune 500 company while living in a reality TV show. The Janissaries, once the empire's greatest strength, started becoming its biggest headache. These elite soldiers realized they had so much power that they could basically dictate terms to the sultans. They became like that employee who knows they're too valuable to fire, so they start showing up late, demanding raises, and generally making everyone's life difficult. Here's where it gets really messy. The Janissaries started revolting whenever they didn't like a sultan's policies. Between 1617 and 1808, they deposed 4 sultans. 4. It's like having your own security team constantly staging coups against you. Meanwhile, European powers were having their own renaissance, not just in art and culture, but in military technology and tactics. While the Ottomans were dealing with palace drama, Europeans were innovating faster than a startup in Silicon Valley. They developed better naval technologies, more effective firearms, and more disciplined armies. The corruption in the Ottoman court became legendary. Government positions were bought and sold like concert tickets. Tax collecting became a free-for-all, where officials competed to see who could squeeze the most money out of the population. It's like having a government where every position is filled through a bidding war rather than qualifications. By the late 1600s, the Ottoman Empire was like a champion boxer who suddenly realizes he can't knock out opponents anymore. The first major wake-up call came at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, where their supposedly invincible navy got completely demolished by a Christian coalition. It was like watching the Titanic hit the iceberg. You could see disaster coming, but couldn't stop it. Then came the Siege of Vienna in 1683. The Ottomans had been the ones besieging European cities for centuries, but this time was different. They got so thoroughly defeated that European armies started chasing them back across the Balkans like a cat chasing a mouse. The hunters had become the hunted. The Russian Empire, under leaders like Catherine the Great, started nibbling away at Ottoman territory like a persistent neighbor gradually taking over your garden. Every war seemed to end, with the Ottomans losing land, paying reparations, or both. It's like being in a poker game, where you keep losing chips but can't afford to leave the table. Here's where economics comes into play. And trust me, this is where things get really painful for the Ottomans. Remember those lucrative trade routes they controlled? Well, European explorers had found sea routes around Africa to reach Asia. Suddenly, merchants could bypass Ottoman territories entirely. It's like owning the only bridge across a river, then watching someone build a highway that goes around your bridge. The empire's financial situation became so desperate that they started debasing their currency. basically printing money without having anything to back it up. Inflation went through the roof. A loaf of bread that cost 1 coin in the morning might cost 2 coins by evening. Imagine trying to budget for groceries when prices change faster than social media trends. But the real killer was nationalism. All those diverse peoples who had been relatively happy under Ottoman rule started wanting their own countries. The Greeks rose up in 1821, followed by the Serbs, Bulgarians, and others. It's like managing a huge apartment building where all your tenants simultaneously decide they want to own their own houses. The Ottomans tried to modernize with the Tanzimat reforms starting in 1839. They attempted to overhaul their legal system, military, and administration all at once. It was like trying to renovate a house while still living in it, messy, expensive, and not entirely successful. These reforms created their own problems. Traditional Ottoman elites felt threatened by change, while modernizers felt the reforms weren't going far enough. Meanwhile, European powers were happy to fund nationalist movements that would further weaken their old rival. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. If the Ottoman Empire was a patient slowly dying from multiple illnesses, World War I was the heart attack that finished the job. And the crazy part? They basically chose to have that heart attack. It's 1914, and Europe is about to explode into the biggest war in human history. The Ottoman Empire, already weakened and struggling, had a choice. They could stay neutral and watch from the sidelines, or they could pick a side and hope for the best. Guess what they chose? They decided to join Germany and Austria-Hungary, thinking they'd picked the winning team. It's like betting everything you own on a horse race after the horse has already stumbled out of the starting gate. The Ottoman leadership figured that if Germany won, they could regain all their lost territories and return to their former glory. But here's where it gets really tragic. The very people they were trying to rule started turning against them. The Arab provinces, which had been part of the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, began revolting with British support. Lawrence of Arabia became a household name by helping Arabs fight against Ottoman rule. It must have felt like finding out your kids have been secretly working with your neighbor to kick you out of your own house. The British Empire, meanwhile, was playing chess, while the Ottomans were playing checkers. They promised Arabs independence if they revolted against Ottoman rule, promised Jews a homeland in Palestine, and promised their allies they could divide Ottoman territories among themselves. It's like promising the same parking spot to 3 different people. Someone's going to be disappointed. The Gallipoli campaign in 1915 was one of the few bright spots for the Ottomans. They successfully defended their homeland against British, Australian, and New Zealand forces. A young officer named Mustafa Kemal emerged as a hero from this battle. Remember that name. He's going to be very important later. But victories like Gallipoli couldn't make up for disasters elsewhere. The Ottoman army was fighting on multiple fronts, against Russians in the east, British in the Middle East, and various allied forces in different locations. It's like playing whack-a-mole, except every mole you miss costs you territory and thousands of lives. By 1918, the Ottoman Empire was completely exhausted. Their armies were defeated, their treasury was empty, and their territories were occupied by allied forces. The Sultan signed an armistice that was basically a surrender disguised with diplomatic language. Here's where our story takes its most dramatic turn. Just when it seemed like the Ottoman Empire was completely finished, someone stepped up to write an entirely different ending. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 was supposed to be the Ottoman Empire's death certificate. The Allied powers planned to carve up what remained of the empire like a Thanksgiving turkey. Greece would get chunks of Western Anatolia, Armenia would get Eastern territories, and the Turkish heartland would be reduced to a tiny rump state. It was the diplomatic equivalent of being told you could only keep your bedroom while strangers moved into the rest of your house. But Mustafa Kemal, the hero of Gallipoli, had different plans. This guy looked at the situation and basically said, "Not on my watch." He started what became known as the Turkish War of Independence, which was like David versus Goliath, except David had to fight multiple Goliaths at the same time. Here's what made Kemal special. While the last Ottoman Sultan was basically accepting whatever the Europeans dictated, Kemal was building a new government in Ankara and organizing resistance. He wasn't trying to save the Ottoman Empire. He realized that was impossible. Instead, he was building something entirely new. The Greek army, encouraged by British support, invaded Western Anatolia, thinking they could easily defeat the exhausted Turks. Big mistake. Kemal's forces, fighting for their homeland's survival, displayed the kind of determination that turns ordinary soldiers into legends. The Greeks found themselves facing an enemy that would rather die than give up another inch of their ancestral land. The final Greek defeat in 1922 was so complete that it ended Greek dreams of recreating the Byzantine Empire. Kemal's forces pushed them all the way back to the sea. It was like watching a comeback victory that nobody saw coming. But here's where Kemal did something that would have been unthinkable to previous Ottoman leaders. He abolished the Sultanate entirely. On November 3rd, 1922, the Ottoman Empire officially ceased to exist after 623 years. The last Sultan left on a British warship, probably wondering how it all went so wrong. Kemal, who would later take the surname Ataturk, meaning father of the Turks, didn't stop there. He abolished the caliphate, established a secular republic, gave women equal rights, changed the alphabet from Arabic to Latin, and basically dragged Turkey from the medieval world into the modern age in less than a decade. It's like watching someone take a broken-down classic car and rebuild it as a modern sports car. The engine was completely different, the design was revolutionary, but somehow it still honored the spirit of what came before. So there you have it, the rise and fall of one of history's most fascinating empires. The Ottomans went from nomadic tribesmen to rulers of 3 continents, from the terror of Europe to the sick man of Europe, and finally transformed into modern Turkey. What can we learn from this incredible journey? Maybe it's that no empire, no matter how powerful, is permanent. Success can breed complacency, and complacency can lead to decline. The Ottomans forgot that the world keeps moving forward, and if you don't adapt, you get left behind. But perhaps more importantly, we learned that endings can also be beginnings. The Ottoman Empire died, but Turkey was born. Sometimes you have to let go of what was to create what could be. If this story amazed you as much as it amazed me, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales from history. Share this video with anyone who loves a good story about empires, ambition, and the crazy ways history unfolds. Trust me, they'll thank you for it. What part of the Ottoman story surprised you the most? Drop a comment below. I love hearing your thoughts, and it helps me know what kind of stories you want to hear next. Until next time, keep exploring the incredible stories that shaped our world.